we were like very concerned that we weren't going to have the money to be able to make a difference in these children's lives at a time when they need us the most.
We've basically married the community, and through good times and bad, rich or poor, we made vows, and this is one of the bad times, and we have to still go out there.
Lest we forget that even during everything being locked down, alcohol was considered like an essential item and liquor stores remained open.
And so it's just a little bit scary because you're in mixed emotions. Like, can I help this person? Can I not help this person? Am I going to get hurt at the same time? What am I going to bring back home? We call it the Tale of Two Cities. My population that I serve in downtown LA, you can get very affluent patients that come in for run-of-the-mill chest pains, stroke, shortness of breath. And then you can also get a lot of homeless patients, and they come to the ER so they can get all of their primary care. You're also seeing a lot of psychosis and drug-induced issues.
There are some really touching things. There was a guy that he was pretty deep into drugs, and I was always helping him. After some months, then someone from behind me just tapped my shoulder and was like, "What?" And when I turned, it was him. I was like, "Wow, that's you." And he was in rehab, and he told me, he hugged me really, really hard, and he said, "Hey, you know what? Thanks to you, I am here."
Oh, you were so giving to me.
I was looking for an outlet or kind of an explanation as to why I've endured so much pain. And through that journey, someone asked me, "Hey, you want to come with me one day and feed the homeless?" I'm like, "Oh, sure, I'll go. I'm not doing anything." And as soon as I went down there in those streets, I felt a connection. I was like, "Oh my God, look at the sea of broken people. Like, gosh, this is me times 10,000 people." I buried my son, I buried my son's father, I buried my father, and I buried my grandmother. The closest people in my life, my aunt and uncles, they all died, and cousins. So my fear has been of death. So when this pandemic hit and my community says, "We still need you," I'm like, okay, great. And then people are telling me, "You could die if you go outside. You can die if people cough on you. You can die if people breathe on you." Like, I was really, my spirit was like so torn.
Typically, our year would be a few big fundraising events, and then working with our incredible network of local heroes around the country and around the world to determine where the greatest needs are, who needs the money the most, how many children can we help and have the most impact with those dollars. Before, we might have been talking to them about long-term plans for a school or a clinic or a microloan program or after-school program or an arts program somewhere in the world. But now we were talking about, art. How do we keep your kids alive next week?
Therapeutic rapport is always done best in person. A therapist is best to really understand and perceive and analyze the client's body language, facial expressions, non-verbal expressions in the room, the physical room, and it's much harder to do that on Zoom.
I am currently the wellness coordinator at a inpatient drug and alcohol treatment center. It was 30 people on a unit. It was community living. It was 2-3 people in a room. Like, the whole thing is to connect, be social, share your experience, and like kind of huddle in a room together.
It's a small place. There's 80 residents. And every phone call that came in came through the front desk. It also allowed us to have a lot of communication with the residents. It was very personal. We always pride ourselves there of knowing our residents, their families, their friends, what they like to eat. It's just small enough to do that.
To unleash the full power of the federal government in this effort today, I am officially declaring a national emergency.
You can explain to them, like, hey, I know that we're talking right now and you may feel like you're okay, but we're going to be putting now a tube down your throat to make you breathe better, and we're going to be putting you on a ventilator. I'm going to call your family members, and when you wake up, you're going to be in the ICU.
At the beginning, when they called for anything similar to a cold, we were like, oh my God, this could be COVID.
When the pandemic began, my role changed significantly, the whole role of my nonprofit and my team members as well. Number one, we were told to isolate and stay in the house and quarantine. And we didn't know any of what that meant. And we also didn't know what that meant for our community that depends on the kindness of strangers. And all the strangers are being told, don't go outside. We had to stop doing hair. We had to stop doing makeup. We had to stop hugging them. We had to stop all of the personal connection that we had been giving them for years. So we spent as little time with them and then with us to create that social distancing. But in their mind, it also created a mental and spiritual distancing.
We want all our grantees to become independent and to learn how to fly without us. That's the ultimate goal, right? Sustainability. But when the pandemic hit, we had to readjust because people needed food. They needed food on the table that night. And so we started making emergency grants in March, feeding hundreds of families here in Watts in Los Angeles, where 85% of the families lost their income, feeding thousands of people in India, where the lockdown in India was so severe, people couldn't even leave their home to get food, even if they had the money to get it. So we had to act there quickly. Same thing in Africa and all around the world. People needed masks, they needed sanitizer, they needed cleaning supplies. All that is stuff that we would normally not be doing, but we had to act fast.
When COVID-19 got on the scene, and what we saw happen was a lot of relapsing. Now, we have the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the opioid epidemic kind of colliding. It's grown into a very complicated and deadly crisis.
The moment quarantine began, things just drastically changed, as I'm sure everyone knows, and I was seeing all my patients on Zoom. Everything was in the apartment. It was claustrophobic. It was terrible. It's been difficult, just to really engage with clients, especially when there's technology issues. I mean, I've lost several patients through Zoom and bad internet connection, and then it just ruins the session. I mean, I've even had patients who preferred phone calls now. They just don't want to use their cameras. And I mean, that's fine. You can still do therapy, but it's just, you don't get the whole picture. You don't get the whole person.
So my first patient, he came in, he was talking to me, he was, we were having a full-on conversation, and then I just noticed, this guy's becoming more labored breathing, the oxygen interventions that we're utilizing are not working appropriately for him. We had to tell him, this is a point where we're going to have to go to other extreme measures where, we're going to sedate you. And he was so confused, but he had to work the next day. And most of these people are primary care providers for their households. So he was like, no, I have to go to work. I'm taking care of my family. My wife doesn't work. I have 4 kids. And we had to explain to him, like, no, this is now a life or death situation. He was on the ventilator for 3 months.
We have plexiglass around the desk, and the residents have plastic zippered entryways, where they were getting meals only in their room. They couldn't come out of their rooms. They were doing screening for staff, temps and questions and PPE, full PPE, masks and visors. I think they were doing as much as they could be doing, but I always felt like it was a tiny bit late.
There's so many other things that can kill them before COVID, they feel like. And that's probably true. I'm like, can you please wear this mask? Can you please wash your hands? Can you please use hand sanitizer? Can you please stay 6 to 10 foot distance from your neighbor? They're like, why? I'm like, well, COVID-19, this can kill you. They're like, well, hunger is going to kill me first. And the women were more concerned about rape will kill me first. Like, this was an invisible predator. They have so much on their plate. They're like, one more thing to fear, and this is something we can't see. Trying to get them to really take that as a real threat has been and remains really, really hard.
It was just horrible. I mean, they had already not allowed visitors, and it was really closed down. But the deaths continued. We had about 15 deaths. I get choked up. It's heartbreaking.
We were able to be frontline soldiers through this whole pandemic. We were able to pass out masks. We were able to pass out hand sanitizers, and we wouldn't have been able to do that. Orly, the fingernail polish company, they made hand sanitizers, and they gave us thousands of bottles. Bite Toothpaste gave us thousands of bottles. Greener Ways gave us thousands of bottles, 10,000 bottles of hand sanitizer. So I feel like we really have made a difference, because we were able, when people couldn't go out or feared going out, they said, well, I can give you the supplies if you're willing to take them out there. And we did that. I think in war or any kind of pandemic, everyone has a role to play. And some people are sitting at home sewing masks, which is very much needed. And they pass them on to us who have the time to go out there and pass them out and know the streets, and don't have any underlying health conditions where we can go out there more than they can go out there. So I think as a whole, we've made a difference.
People were also looking like, how do we give? How do we make a difference? How do we help? And because we had this network of local heroes around the world, we could immediately plug into them. We could get them the money in a day. And so we immediately reached out to our donor base and to anyone who, wanted to support Go Campaign, and said, if you're looking to help the most vulnerable right now in this pandemic, we can help you do that. We can connect you.
I like to, when they come in, I don't like when they come in scared and short of breath, but then you're like, okay, a lot's going to be happening right now. We're going to get through this, and you're explaining everything step by step. It's rewarding when they're after the breathing treatments or after the steroids, and they're you can breathe again. Thank you.
With my job, I'm an essential worker, so I never was on lockdown. I never worked from home. I still was coming into work. But during that time that I was quarantined, that I was on lockdown and I couldn't go to work, I think aside from, learning so much about the strength of my family, I think I learned a lot about, and it was something that I already thought I knew, but I think just the value of the relationships in your life. Coming into work and just being able to be a support system or part of a support system for people who need it, and seeing how they don't take that for granted like they may have in the past. And then at home, just realizing or having these moments, because it wasn't just one moment, but just these moments of really appreciating human connection.
Every time I go out there and I talk to someone, it's rewarding for me, because from a personal standpoint, a tragedy of feeling alone during some of my darkest nights, I know having no one to talk to is just a humongous weight on top of everything else that you're dealing with. So I know that every time I go out there, I feel like we've done something amazing. But the most rewarding thing to me, I think, is just the trust that we've gained in our community. I mean, me, myself, having a lot of issues and being broken, we tend not to trust as much. When you've had your heart broken over and over again, you tend not to want to give your heart to anyone else. And I realize that we're working with a community, a sea of people who have just been let down, who've had their heart broken, who feel hopeless. And here I am, yet again, another person saying, hey, trust me, I got you. It's really rewarding to gain the trust of broken people, because I know how hard it was for me, being a broken person, to give my trust to others.
When you work with health, the educational part comes to you. But when you don't, you have to actually educate yourself. So when we get to these people's houses and that happens, you actually get there and the person is unfortunately deceased, then you have to provide them with support, right? And they are afraid because it is something they may have as well, right? And so that support and that part of explaining them how to look after themselves, and how did this happen, and all the support, I think that is actually that is really hard. It's really hard to see, and it's really hard to manage. And but the more you talk to people, the more you reach them, and the more you explain, the easier it becomes.
I mean, 2020 is hard on all of us, right? This is not a fun year. Any way you look at it, we're not going to look back on this time fondly, and it's stressful, and that applies to everybody, including myself. And so, I think I'm so fortunate to have this job, is because I can focus my time and energy on the positive work that we're doing, and to bring help and to bring smiles to children who wouldn't otherwise be smiling right now. And that gives me hope, but it also takes my mind off what's going on in the world, and it lets me focus, and it lets my staff focus on all the incredible change that we are seeing by being able to help children and families through this crisis. And so that's been a real blessing for us to be able to work in this sphere. It keeps our hopes high in a time in the world when it's often challenging to feel hopeful. 2020 has presented us with such unique challenges that we've never seen before. I think it's up to us to rise to 2021 to respond with answers like we've never given before.
I think that I've grown as a person and as a clinician, and I feel like we've been able to use the resources that we've had, the resources that we once had so abundantly were scaled down, and so we were able to think with like what we actually had on our hands to effectively impact the patients. And I know as a person I've grown, because these type of challenges no one ever really expected to have. So it's made me more aware of my surroundings, more aware of the contact that I make with people, how is my presence affecting other people, and how is the presence affecting myself as a person. So I think this year I've grown more self-aware, and I've realized, this is my priority, and this is what's going to make me happy. And it's all about, like, for me, it's my self-awareness and being content with where I am and being happy with what I have, because I know at the end of the day, it can be taken away from me.
I think the homeless have been very inspirational to me. I mean, just to watch them wake up every day, get in line and say good morning, have a smile on their face, never complaining. I mean, here we are housed, we're complaining, oh, I only got one case of water, that person got 10, or I only have 4 rolls of toilet paper. And the homeless community absolutely had nothing. And they are very inspirational to me. They have taught me so much about myself. They've taught me so much about being grateful and gratitude. They've taught me so much about just being comfortable and happy right where you're at. Like, happiness is not where you're at. It's and emotionally where you're at. I've met some very happy people on the streets. I say, good morning, how you doing? And they're like, I'm great. I woke up this morning. I have nothing to complain about. And I'm like, my God, you just woke up in a tent on the ground. You just had to shoo away rats out of your tent. And you just told me you have nothing to complain about. And it's really, really opened my eyes to a lot of the things that the world, we're very entitled.
I think society in general has changed within this year, and we can feel it in a lot of different areas. Although this is a bad situation, we should look at the big picture and notice that we'll have actually grown in so many ways. What I want is actually for people to be able to balance their new reality with their usual life.
We have the potential to create the most remarkable and amazing new world that we've always dreamed for. At first, I was, we would say, oh, I can't wait for things to get back to normal. Like, when is this lockdown going to end, or when's COVID going to stop spreading and the numbers are going to go down and the curve's going to flatten? Like, let's get things back to normal. I don't think we want things back to normal anymore.
2019 was an absolutely awful year for me. And I went into 2020 with this mindset of better things are coming. They have to. It's going to be a better year. And then COVID did what it did, and it struck. But I think that when something involves another human life, and I fully expect to, when my mother gets older, to have to take care of her, or, same with my grandmother, like that comes along with, I think that's why some people have children, is so someone can take care of them when they get older. But you don't expect it, when you don't expect it to happen, and it just suddenly you're in a position where you're the only one. And I think it really humbled me. I don't think I'll ever take anything for granted again.
I think it's reasonable to ask not for an end to the pandemic. I don't think that might happen so soon, but for there to be light at the end of the tunnel.
I lost my son when I was about 21 years old to a tragic accident 5 days to his third birthday. I was pregnant with my oldest daughter. I have 5 living kids now. I broke in my 20s. Life became very tumultuous for me. Even with 5 living kids, this pain haunted me, and I just couldn't understand what I was supposed to do with it. His father, years after that, died of cancer. I woke up time and time again. I survived something that I shouldn't have survived. Most people wouldn't survive. I don't know how I'm still here. I don't even know why I'm still here, but I am. And if I survive that very tumultuous time in my life, I can certainly get through a pandemic. I can certainly get through all the feelings that I'm having now. That experience also has given me appreciation for life. And 2020 is not such a bad year. 2020 is just a different year. It's a year where we wake up and wear masks and hand sanitizers, but we wake up.
Traditionally, it might be clean water in Africa, or helping keep girls out of the sex trade by investing in microloans for them in Nepal, or an after-school program in rural Mississippi where the kids are living below the poverty line. Things suddenly changed in a moment. We could no longer just go on following regular course of business. Things that were true, in January were no longer true in March. We're never going back to that old normal. We need to create a new, better, more just, fairer world. There have been a lot of flaws, a lot of holes exposed this year. COVID-19 has put a spotlight on a lot of places where we were falling short as a country, but also as a species. I'm so inspired by the people who are not sitting still. There's an Einstein quote, I think I'll get it right. It says that he said, the world is a dangerous place to live in, not because of the people who are evil, but because of the people who don't do anything about it. And I think that's so true. And I think that the people who support Go Campaign and are people who do something about it. I think people who are out there in the streets or out there, obviously the frontline workers, the people who have been providing us our groceries, and the workers in the hospitals and the doctors, and these people who are out there doing something about it, who they're inspiring to all of us.